Yeah, the question is it real? That's what everybody wants to know. Is that real? Is that really real, Clint? I'm sharing it to a couple of groups that I'm the administrator of. Yeah, is that really real, Clint? Yeah, it's really real. That's Acapulco, baby. Acapulco, Ming. It's really real. It is real. And I usually wait a minute or so to let some people come on because, they're not quite on yet. There comes some people. And in today's story, I'm going to be telling my story about George Clooney. I'm going to be telling several stories about George Clooney, as a matter of fact. And here I go. All right, everybody. This is Clint Arthur. Welcome to Sunset Stories number 11. 8, Ming. Numero 8. Sunset Stories. See? Now, what I have on Sunset Stories to compel you to want to participate and observe, what I have is I got beautiful sunset and I got my good buddy George Clooney as my subject matter. Yep. George E. Clooney. Not that his middle name is E, just that I call him Georgie. George E. Clooney. Now, this all begins when I was on a bus. I was riding a bus at the Sundance Film Festival. For those of you who've never been to the Sundance Film Festival, it happens in January. It's freaking cold there. And that's where filmmakers go to see and be seen. You're going to see movies, you're going to see movie stars, people, and you're going to be seen. You want to be seen there. Now, the way you get around in Sundance, some people like if you're a studio executive or somebody who's super rich, maybe you rent an SUV and you drive around. I don't know why anybody would do that. It's freaking covered with snow there. There's like so much snow in Sundance in Park City, Utah. I personally wouldn't drive. But me, today, I hardly ever drive. I don't want to drive. My car is Uber, although here in Acapulco, I have rented a car, which is not cheap, by the way. You would think it would be cheap to do anything in Acapulco. It's cheap to do most things, but not cheap to rent a car. In Park City, Utah, way back in 1994, I was on the bus and I see this very pretty woman on the bus nearby, and she's wearing a very unusual coat. She's very pretty and she's wearing a very unusual coat. And I say to her, "Hey, nice coat." She goes, "Thank you. I made this coat out of an antique blanket." I go, "Say what?" She goes, "That's right. I manufacture antique blanket coats." I go, "Huh, what's your name?" She goes, "Sarah." I go, "I'm Clint Arthur." Maybe I just said I'm Clint. In those days, I didn't know that celebrities introduce themselves by their full name. If I had known it, I would have said I'm Clint Arthur, wanting to immediately raise my status by employing my full name, as I always do now, and as all celebrities always do. But I think at that time, when I knew nothing, when I was seriously nobody, I'm pretty sure I just said my name is Clint. And we went to a movie, and then we went to another movie, and then we went to dinner, and then I'm back in Los Angeles, and she invites me to go to a movie premiere. And I go to that movie premiere with her up on Sunset Boulevard. There's like these theaters there, where they show all of the artistic movies on Sunset and Crescent Heights or Laurel Canyon, somewhere up there. I think it's Laurel Canyon. And we go to that movie together, and I realize I'm not just on a date with her, she's also on a date with another guy for the same movie. I end up on a date, I end up on a double date with Sarah and some other guy that she's also dating at the same movie. By the end of the movie, he decides to leave. And when he leaves, she says to me, "You want to come over to my house for some homemade chicken soup?" And I said, "Yeah." Well, that was the beginning of me dating Sarah. And our next date, we went to a club on Little Santa Monica Boulevard. It was called Dan Tana's. Dan Tana's is like a hipster, long-established bar, restaurant, Italian restaurant. And it ain't cheap. It ain't super expensive, but it ain't cheap. I had never really been there before because just wasn't a place I would go, not having a lot of money in those days. But we walk in the door at Dan Tana's, and as soon as we walk in the door, Sarah goes, "Oh, hey, there's George Clooney. Let's go say hello." And I go, "You know George Clooney?" She goes, "I used to date him. And his best friend. At the same time." You see what I'm saying? This was a theme that Sarah had going on in her life. Dating two guys at the same time. We go over to George Clooney. George Clooney is tall. And he's with a model, hot, beautiful chick who's also tall. This was around the time that Quentin Tarantino was producing From Dusk Till Dawn, the vampire movie. And George Clooney was starring in that movie, and he had all these tattoos on his neck, like all kinds of like spider tattoos, I think. I don't know. I do remember he had all these tattoos. And we go over to George, and Sarah says, "Hey, George, how you doing?" And George Clooney goes, "Oh, Sarah, I am so fucking wasted right now." Now look, I hope I didn't offend you by using the F word. If I did, please take it up with George when you see him. That's just exactly what he said and exactly how he said it. Anybody who knows me knows I do great impersonations of people, and that's exactly what he said and how he said it. I personally wouldn't use the F word, but he did. So if it bothered you, I apologize, and please take it up with him. We chit-chat just a little bit. She introduces me. I shake his hand. And then we go to get our table because we had our names in to get a table for dinner. And we sit down and we have an Italian dinner at this Italian restaurant, Dan Tana's. And of course, I say to Sarah, "So how do you know George Clooney? How, what, huh?" She goes, "Well, I used to be a talent agent for many years. In fact, I was George Clooney's agent for more than 10 years. And I got that guy part after part after part. I got him series regular roles year after year after year. He was always getting cast as a series regular in pilot after pilot after pilot. Because I knew that he was going to be George Clooney, and he knew that he was going to be George Clooney. The only people that did not know he was going to be George Clooney was Hollywood did not know he was going to be George Clooney. And if you look at his resume, you will see He's been in a million pilots and had a million guest starring roles on a million shows before he had his breakthrough role, which was ER. Now, ER hadn't even happened yet at that point. It really hadn't. We were just talking about him being in that movie From Dusk Till Dawn. I go, but what about dating him and his best friend? What was that all about? She goes, well, I was also his best friend's agent. And I was dating both of them at the same time. And then the best friend asked me to marry him. So he and I got engaged, and I broke up with George Clooney. And went on to get engaged and have a multi-year engagement with that best friend of his, Tom, who was also my client, before finally, ultimately, Tom and I broke up. And when we sold the house that we owned together, I got enough money to buy this charm bracelet. And she shakes her charm bracelet. Yep, I basically traded my house for a charm bracelet. This is exactly what she said. A couple of months later, ER, remember, starring George Clooney as the hunk emergency room doctor, ER blows up, and George Clooney becomes the biggest actor in Hollywood. The biggest. And I remember Sarah sitting down at her desk one day and writing George Clooney a congratulations note about how happy she was that he finally had his huge breakthrough. Sarah then got pregnant by me. And of course, I remember going for a walk with my friend Charles Sherman, who was much, much older than me. He and I had been friends since 1988, way back in the beginning when I first moved to LA. And I went for a walk with Charles and I said, yeah, Sarah's pregnant and I think I'm gonna ask her to marry me. And he goes, oh, no, don't do that. Don't do it. You don't want to do it. I'm like, no, yeah, I do. He goes, are you sure? Are you sure that's really what you want to do? You don't have to do that. And I'm like, no, I want to do that. Are you sure? I call up my parents. I say, Mom, you know, you told me you had a ring for me. Well, my girlfriend is pregnant and I want to ask her to marry me, so can you please give me the ring? She goes, well, I want to meet her first. I'm like, all right. So she comes out, my parents come out, we all go out to dinner with Sarah. And you know, my parents, my family is Jewish. My parents raised me Jewish. I'm not an observant Jew, but I was bar mitzvahed. I am a Jew. Sarah is what you would call a shiksa goddess. She is not Jewish. She's Swedish, from Oregon, the state of Oregon. She was like as foreign to me as I could possibly imagine. And that's what really turned me on about her. What really turned me on about Sarah was that, oh, and she was also, let's see, she was also almost 10 years older than me. And what really turned me on about Sarah was how improbable we were as a couple. I mean, it just didn't make any sense. And that was what was so exciting to me for some reason. The less it made sense for me to be with Sarah, the more, if I could be with her, it excited me and turned me on, even though it made no sense. My parents come out, we go out to dinner. Yes, she's a lovely woman. And here's the ring. Now, at that point in my life, I was 100% living off credit cards. 100%. I mean, I had had some writing deals that I scrounged up for myself in Hollywood. From going to places like the Cannes Film Festival, the Sundance Film Festival. I had met some people and been hired to write some stuff, but I never really made any money the way screenwriters are supposed to make money in Hollywood. It's an illusion, certainly for anybody who's nobody like I was, right? Half the time when I was dating Sarah, I didn't even have a car. I remember in those days, I had a garage. Like, I was a roommate. We had a 3-bedroom condo on the beach in Venice, and we had the 3-car garage. And the way I was able to have any kind of car at all was that I made a deal with the guy who lived across the street, who managed a building that I used to live in before I moved into the condo. And I said, hey man, I've got this garage, you've got a Triumph Spitfire. And then he had the Triumph Spitfire. Remember those beautiful, cool Triumph Spitfires, British racing green, right? He had a Triumph Spitfire convertible. Then his girlfriend blew up the Triumph Spitfire convertible, racing it in the Hollywood Hills before somebody killed her. That's a whole nother story. And then once he no longer had that car, he bought a Porsche 911. No, I'm sorry. Was it a 911? Yeah, you know that little square Porsche that was like a Carmen Ghia engine inside of a Porsche. I think it's a 914. That was it. The Porsche 914 with the targa tops. So what the deal was, hey man, I got a garage in Venice. You could park your car in my garage and then we'll share your car. And that worked out pretty good, except sometimes when I would need to go to Sarah's house, my fiance's house, I would have to ride my bike all the way to West Hollywood or take a bus all the way to West Hollywood. It was no bueno. But in any case, I remember the proposal. What a fantastic proposal this was. I was at Sarah's house for dinner. She loved to cook, and she was a fantastic cook. And she goes, listen, being pregnant, I'm gonna need help with this baby. And so I want you to move in. So I moved out of my apartment in Venice, where I used to surf on the beach in Venice every single day, and I was one of the best surfers in Venice. And I moved in with her into her apartment on Doheny Drive in Los Angeles and in West Hollywood. And I became engaged with her, and that's when I got that ring. All right. All that time, I'm living on credit cards. I got no money. And a lot of times I would take us out to dinner on the credit card. Whatever available balance I had, by the time the baby was born, I had no more available balance. I was completely maxed out on my several different credit cards. And I spoke to my friend Charles again, and I said, Charles, man, I don't know what to do. I have no more access to even anything on my credit cards anymore. And he goes, well, why don't you drive a cab? And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, why don't you get a job driving a cab? I mean, it's not glorious, but at least you're gonna make cash every single day. And I go, And I called up Yellow Cab and I said, hey, I'm interested in finding out about becoming a cab driver. And the guy goes, well, my name is Rick. I'm the dispatcher here at Yellow Cab. We have a taxi cab training class for new drivers, and it starts on Thursday. It's a 2-day class. If you want to come, it starts at this time, and you need to show up at this place. And boom, next thing I know, I'm studying how do you be a taxi driver in Los Angeles. And what that really came down to was how do you use the Thomas Guide, which is the big map book. How do you use the Thomas Guide to find your way around LA? Because I'll tell you what, even though I had lived in LA at that point for, let's see, almost 7 years, I didn't know LA. I didn't know how to get around in Los Angeles. You know how I learned to get around in Los Angeles? By being a yellow taxi driver. Driving all around that whole city. Every night I would put 400 miles on a taxi. And I did the first couple of days as a taxi driver, driving in the daytime, because I didn't want to totally wreck my whole relationship with Sarah. I didn't want to be driving all night long and then come home and be asleep all the day and then do it all again. But driving during the daytime, I drove like 2 or 3 days and got tickets and didn't make a lot of money because it was a lot of traffic. It was just a nightmare to be a taxi driver in the daytime. So I switched to being a nighttime taxi driver. And that was really the beginning of the end of my relationship with Sarah, because there I was. I would go out and drive from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. And then I'd come home with a 4-pack of Guinness pub draft cans. And then I would drink 4 Guinnesses and go to sleep. And I'd wake up at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon and then go out again. And it was the beginning of the end. Her career took off. As I started working nights, I was making $1,200, $1,300 a week, working full-time as a taxi driver. And I started paying for everything. And with my help, once the baby was born, with my help, we moved into this house. We needed a bigger place. We moved into a house in the hills. And next thing you know, Sarah had 5 of her clients as series regulars on network television shows. And I was a taxi driver. And I remember she had a big party one night on Saturday night. And everybody, all her fabulous Hollywood actor friends came over. And I took my briefcase, with my Thomas Guide in it and my notebook or whatever else I would carry in that briefcase in those days. And I went out to be a taxi driver in the middle of the party, because that's what I was doing. And next thing I know, we are going to visit her family up in Oregon. And she asked me to put the cradle, the little bassinet, I don't know what it is, the little car carrier seat. No, it was a stroller. She asked me to put the stroller in the back of the taxi that we took to go to the airport. And I didn't want to bring the stroller. I didn't want to be bothered carrying a stroller around. I just wanted to carry the kid. I'd carried my daughter. And when we got to the airport, she said, "Where's the stroller?" And I said, "I left it at home." And she goes, "But I told you to put it in the car." And I go, "I didn't want to put it in the car." And she was pissed. And I'll never forget, we're on Alaska Airlines. No, we were on Delta Airlines, because I bought and paid for the tickets. And I remember how she made fun of me. She's like, "Delta Airlines? Who flies to Oregon on Delta Airlines? You fly on Alaska Airlines." And we're sitting there, and she's stewing, pissed, mad. And the baby's in between us. And she goes, "Hey, listen, I've decided I'm done. When we get back to LA, I want you to move out." I'm like, "What?" And we don't say another word the whole rest of the flight. We don't say another word the whole night. We see her family. We're staying at her mom's house in Gresham, Oregon. And I don't think I said anything to her all night long. I wake up the next morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I wake her up and I go, hey, when we get back to LA, you still want me to move out? And she goes, and I go, well, drive me to the airport right now. We get up, get dressed. I had already packed. We go to the airport. I had already booked my flight. She drops me off at the airport. I fly back to Los Angeles. I go back to our house in the Hollywood Hills to pack up my stuff because I just want to be gone. I just want to be gonzo. She had her best friend, Val, house sitting at our house that night. She was taking care of our dog, Toby, and house sitting the house. And I remember sitting in the living room late at night, smoking pot, drinking wine or tequila with Val, and crying, bawling my eyes out, like out of control, like I've never done before or since. And Val goes, what do you think you could have done different? And I said, this is exactly what I said, crying, bawling. I said, I could have been more. I could have been more. Believe me, I know what it feels like to not feel like you're enough. Because I, at that point, felt like I was nothing. I moved out and called up a mutual friend of ours, this guy, Philip. Philip had the exact same birthday as me. He was the first person I ever met who had my same birthday, August 28th. And I moved into Philip's spare room in his house in Bel Air before ultimately I moved onto the boat. I got a boat in Marina del Rey. I joined a gym. And I remember very clearly one day I was in the outdoor pool of the gym. It was called the Marina Fitness Club. And there was the 90 freeway in Marina del Rey. And in between the two sections of the freeway was this long stretch of grass. And part of that was the club, Marina Fitness. And they had an outdoor pool, and I was swimming laps in the outdoor pool. And of course, because I was no longer having to pay for everything for the house in the Hollywood Hills, I quit driving the taxi. I inherited some money from my grandmother who died. And I'm swimming laps in the pool outside in the middle of the day on a Wednesday or Thursday afternoon, looking at the blue sky, feeling like I had gotten out of prison, like I was a free man again. And I said to my friend Charles, I feel like I'm free. And he goes, man, I tried to keep you from making that mistake, but you just didn't want to hear it. You had to do it. I go, I know. Shortly after that point, my daughter had her 1-year birthday. And there is a picture of the party. And who's at the party? George Clooney. And who's in the picture? George Clooney and this guy, Bobby Hosea, who was a great guy. There was a movie I think it was on Fox Network. It was the O.J. Simpson story on Fox, and Bobby Hosea played the role of O.J. Simpson in the O.J. Simpson story. And there's Bobby Hosea and George Clooney holding my daughter in the photo. And you could see like the really awkward face that George Clooney has just from holding a baby. He's like, oh man. Since that time, I have used George Clooney multiple times in my television appearances. I remember in particular, there was a movie of George Clooney's that I loved called Up in the Air. And it was all about George Clooney as a motivational speaker, and he had this whole saying that he used to have, like, what's in your backpack? And I remember this was like 2011 when that movie came out. Big movie. And I remember I did a segment because I had just learned about props and the importance of props when you go on TV. And I did this segment called, if this was going to be the last year of your life, what would be in your backpack? Because I had just written a book and published a book called The Last Year of Your Life. And man, I did really well with that segment. I got on a lot of TV shows. And every time they would start the TV segment of me being interviewed on the news, I would have them play the clip of George Clooney in Up in the Air, where he goes, so what's in your backpack? Like 15 seconds. I've done lots of TV appearances with George Clooney in them. Although he doesn't know about any of it, I know. And I'm grateful to George Clooney. Grateful to him for helping me to get on a lot of TV. And mostly I'm grateful for his example, because I try to share with my students all the time that if you want to be somebody very special in the eyes of your customers and prospects, in my world, I call that a celebrity entrepreneur. There really has to be two people who know that you're going to be that celebrity. The first person is you. Remember what Sarah said. George Clooney always knew that he was going to be George Clooney. The second person is you need to have somebody who can help you. For my clients, that's me. I've helped more than 1,000 authors, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs book themselves on more than 4,500 television appearances in the last 7-8 years. And I know that I can help anybody to do it. I've got people getting on TV all the time. And in this day and age, people are going on TV on Skype video. It's really easy to get on TV these days if you can give them what you want to give them, if you can give them what they need you to give them. And I know exactly what they need to have in order for you to get on TV. I have a mathematical formula for how to get on TV anytime you want for free. That's what we deliver at Celebrity Launchpad with a guarantee. If you attend Celebrity Launchpad's live implementation event, I guarantee you will book yourself on at least 3 TV news or talk shows with ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox, or you get all your money back plus $1,000. And as a matter of fact, Danny DeNovo, I'll be posting her video really soon. As she said during the Celebrity Quarantine Story Conference, she's already booked 14. Dave Nasani, I got bad news for you. I just got a text from Danny DeNovo a couple days ago. I think it was yesterday. Yeah, it was Monday. Oh, it was 2 days ago. Monday. She goes, hey, let's start the week with some good news. I just booked my 15th television appearance off cold calls, and it'll be on Zoom. During the pandemic, she's been booking herself on shows on Zoom. So if you're interested in making that happen, Celebrity Launchpad is at guaranteedcelebrity.com, guaranteed with the D, celebrity.com. Fill out the brief application. If I think you look like you're going to be good, I will either call you up to talk to you or send you an enrollment form, and you can get going right away, booking yourself on shows with cold calls. My goal is for you to be on TV shows before you even show up for Celebrity Launchpad, because the more appearances you do before you do my training, before you go to be with my friends on their shows in their studios, the more appearances you do, the better you're going to be when you come to book yourself on shows at the live implementation event. So again, check it out at guaranteedwithad celebrity.com. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on television, hopefully with my good friend, George Clooney. Good night, everybody.